Welcome. Thank you for tuning into this edition of NYSSBA Newsmakers with me, Tim Kremer, the Executive Director of the New York State School Boards Association. Today, Heather Briccetti, the President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State, is here to discuss the current business and education climate in our state. The Business Council is the primary statewide association advocating for New York's business community. Heather was born in Tunisia, the northernmost country in Africa, to Peace Corps volunteers and raised in Syracuse, New York. A graduate of SUNY Binghamton and Albany Law School, Heather currently lives in the Capital Region on a farm with her 3 sons. Heather, thank you for being here with us today. We're very happy to have you here on Newsmaker.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I was very interested in reading about you and learning more about your background. Amazing. You've done some terrific things in your career, and I'm anxious to talk to you a little bit about some of the impact that the Business Council has on the economy here in the state and some of the positions you take on education in particular. So the things that I was hoping we could talk about would be things like the college and career standards. You and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
A little bit about how schools and business can work together at the state and community levels. We've talked before about P-TECH. You're going to have to tell me what P-TECH stands for.
Hopefully I'll get it right.
All right, but I am very positive about that program. It's a very good program. And then STEM education. You know, some of the things that I know you have 3 sons. That sounds to me, from what you've told me about them, they're the type of students who would be interested in STEM education.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about that. And then as it refers to the economy, I hope we'll have the opportunity to talk about the property tax cap, maybe job market, the outlook for the next few years from your point of view. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, good. So let's start off with some of the education things. College and career standards. We, as an organization, had put together a series of workshops a couple years ago in support of the Common Core learning standards, and we thought we were on the right track. And unfortunately, we've now gone through into a moratorium and a variety of other setbacks. But I've sensed that your organization has remained in support of high learning standards. Tell me about that.
Well, first I'll start off by saying, at least from my perspective, there's been sort of, it's a new word to me, conflation of the standards and curriculum, and they're very different things. And I think the standards are really what the bar should be for graduation. What should the minimum be when you graduate? And in looking at this as an organization, my employers want to know that someone coming into the workforce has some basic readiness. If they're not going directly into the workforce, if they're going to college, their parents are going to want to know that they have some basic readiness so they don't spend years doing remediation.
Sure.
And the Common Core standards were based off of the Massachusetts standards, which were really considered the gold standard for what should the baseline be in terms of skills needed upon graduation from high school. So we strongly supported them, not just because employers want people with skills walking into the workforce or the ability to learn, but also because they want to be able to attract talent from other areas. And so saying my school district has very high standards for graduation, so when your kid graduates, you know that they're ready for college or they're ready to go into the workforce. That's something that they use for recruitment, and it's very valuable to businesses. And they, live in the communities where the businesses are. So it really does matter.
You hear from some of your members, I know you represent about 2,400 private sector businesses.
Yes.
Do you hear from some of those employers that the students that are graduating from high school in New York are not ready to take on these jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would take it a step further and say that in many instances there are examples where employers have tried to intervene and assist in basically improving the outcomes so that when kids do graduate, they're able to enter the workforce or they're able to go directly into college. And it's been, very sort of ad hoc and scattershot across the state. And mixed, I think, experiences, because in many instances it depends on how open the districts are to engaging with their local employers.
I was really surprised at the attack that was held towards, or the anger that was held towards the Common Core learning standards. I understood when the teacher said, you know, this isn't fair to be evaluating me based on some things I don't have any control over. I understood when people said, look, you're testing us on things that we really haven't been exposed to or been prepared to teach for. I get all that. There needed to be more time to roll this thing out. We all I think, agree with that.
Yeah.
But it really has turned on the standards themselves. And I'm like you. I read those things for the first time years ago now and did a lot of comparison. I thought, you know, I think this is probably what you would want your kids to know and be able to do at certain points in their career. And I did not ever understand, and even to this day, I'm not sure I understand what the anger and animosity has been towards the Common Core learning standards.
I really think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding of what they are. And I heard a PhD professor, expert in education, give a presentation on explaining the standards, and she said, look, if this was basketball, if the rest of the world is aiming at an NBA height hoop, you can't ask your kids all the way through school to only aim at a 6-foot hoop. I mean, some of them will be able to make the basket maybe at the end of 12 years, but some of them won't unless they've been practicing on the higher bar. And that's what a standard is. It's just what is the bare minimum you should have to graduate that represents your ability to go forward after you know, elementary and high school.
So you mentioned, you know, that you guys across the state, some of your members attempted to participate in maybe helping develop the educational program at the local level. Some might have been rebuffed.
There's, in some instances, some school districts have said, look, you know, we don't want you in the school, but we'll take whatever you're willing to donate.
Yeah.
And that isn't, the employers, some are willing to do that obviously for philanthropic reasons, but that doesn't help them get to the core goal of trying to improve the outcomes. And on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, we've got great outcomes, in particular with Wegmans and the Hillside School, or the Hillside Family of Agencies, in their work scholarship program, getting kids able to complete their degrees or diplomas and at the same time learning soft skills on how to work and interact with customers. And I think Wegmans would tell you their experience has been fantastic with this, and a lot of the kids that are in this program are kids that were not ever expected to graduate. So the results are really good, but there's not always a willingness to engage with the employer community.
Well, I guess I'm not surprised, but I'm a little disappointed to hear that. You know, the people whom I represent, these school board members, come from all walks of life.
Yeah.
You would like to think that there's people on that school board who recognize that this is a developmental stage while in school leading to something beyond, be it college, be it career, and having an awareness of what it's going to take to be successful out there and being able to articulate that at the board level. I hope they're doing that, and I hope they're working with your organization or people whom you represent in trying to make sure that that end game is not lost. The mission, of course, is that these kids develop to a point where they are able to graduate ready for whatever awaits them afterwards.
Yeah, and you want really to know what are the opportunities in the community that where the school is. You know, there are people like myself who I would love for my kids to find jobs, you know, in the capital region and be able to stay local. It's important to know what are the opportunities that are there now and what are the opportunities going to be in 4 and 8 years. And you know, some of that is you just don't know, but you know it's probably going to be tech related. It's probably going to be more skills than what students are currently graduating from high school with.
Well, that's what you want them to have, a skilled job, have a career awaiting them. And yeah, if you can keep them near home, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, and the thing about upstate New York in particular is we actually have a lot of unfilled skilled jobs at the moment. We don't have the skilled workforce to fill it at the same time that we have these large pockets of unemployment in the larger urban cities. And if we could figure out a way to match, you know, those students or those individuals with the open jobs. I mean, middle skills jobs are good paying middle class jobs, and you can support a family on them.
That's right. Well, P-TECH, I know early on I was introduced to a gentleman Rashid Davis, who's the principal of a P-Tech high school, maybe the first one ever.
The first one, yep.
In Brooklyn. And the idea of being able to get a high school diploma and an associate's degree in anywhere from 4 to 6 years, but you're not leaving here unless you have that associate's degree. It's like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Tell me about that program.
So the Brooklyn School, which Rashid Davis is the principal of, is the first one. It is a partnership, in that instance, between the New York City School District, CUNY, and IBM. And all three entities are really the moving parts in each of the P-Tech schools. The students, it's a public high school. The students are in the program for up to 6 years. They graduate with an associate's degree in a field where there are current workforce needs in the community. And in this case, IBM participates in developing the program so that when the students graduate, they are either first in line for an open position at IBM, or they now only have 2 years left to complete a 4-year degree. And so this is really amazing. The early results are incredible. This is a very low income area, high poverty, predominantly African American, predominantly male population in the school. And their graduation and retention rates are better than anybody. I mean, they're 94 or 93% retention from 9th grade through this year will be the first graduating class. They also had students graduate with an associate's degree after 4 years. An incredible accomplishment.
That's really amazing.
When you think that the average time to a 4-year degree for students in New York is 6 years, this puts them on track to actually complete a 4-year degree in 4 years or fewer. And so the results are very, very encouraging. There are now 30 P-Techs in the state. The very thing that we feel very positive about is each school has a business partner in that community that has current existing workforce needs. So the programs will be different in each area based on what the location, where there's job openings in that community. So the students know and they're exposed to employers and have a sense of what it would be like to work for these companies when they finish high school with their associate's degree, or they get a taste of, for example, the Troy High School, GE is a partner. Maybe they will figure out that they want to go on and become an engineer, or maybe they want to get into medical sciences where there's a ton of existing workforce needs. But the thing is the kids are getting a vision of what it would be like to work in these places that they never otherwise would have really gotten unless one of their parents or peers had a parent who worked in these places.
Science, technology, engineering, and math, what we oftentimes refer to as STEM. Some people want to throw in arts and call it STEAM, but STEM.
Yeah.
Why should we be concerned about whether or not students have access to STEM programs?
I mean, I think really basically the vast majority of the jobs that are going to be created in the next 10 to 20 years are going to require some basic skill set in science, technology, engineering, math. I would personally say one of the biggest complaints I hear from employers, other than lacking in math skills, is writing. And that's, interestingly not included on that list. And of course, as a child of a retired art teacher, public school art teacher, I think the A should be in there. But I would add in a lot of other things too. I think they should be learning financial literacy, basic ethics. All of these things would require a longer school day, which I personally am not opposed to, but I know that there's a lot of people who get, I think it's silly that we're still on an agrarian calendar, and I live in a rural school district, so.
Well, you're up against some traditions there.
I know,
Good luck
I
with
know.
that, because we've just learned through research, a lot of research would suggest to us that we start our school day too early.
Yeah.
These young people, their bodies are just different. Their metabolisms are different, and we should be starting later and going later. They'd be much better off doing it, and yet you try to talk about that happening, changing the school day so that the child's more alert when they arrive. Boy, I'll tell you, people do not want to change any of that.
As a parent of 3 teenage boys, I would say from their perspective, it would be ideal to start the school day around 1 in the afternoon. So not going to work.
That's a little late.
But
yeah.
I would tend to agree that we start too early, but I think we also end too early. I think there's no reason to have that shorter school day, but I'm not suggesting that should all be seat time.
Yeah.
I think it's important that there be some activity, some interaction, maybe some art, maybe some, time to explore, computer science or things that may not be built into the very structured sort of curriculum that the schools have to fulfill.
We have an awful lot on our plate that we got to jam into that school day
Yeah.
now. But let's say that I'm a child who is not that interested in science, technology, engineering, or math. I don't really care for it. I'm more inclined to be of the art or music or
Right.
something else. Am I going to get left out of this economy?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think, first off, there's always going to be room in the economy for arts and music, and which is an art, and dance, and all kinds of things. But I also think there's an opportunity with technology to match the interest of the students with some of the skills needed for the economy. And you can do that if they're interested in music. A lot of music is mathematical. A lot of music is based on math. And you could squeeze some math in a context that is interesting to them.
I see.
And I think, art, you can teach engineering with art. You can teach engineering with an architecture, which is a lot of engineering. You could teach through art classes.
Yeah.
And physics you can teach in art. And but looking at ways to blend the curriculum and customize it to each student sounds impossible with the number of students that we have. But I think with technology, it's something that's definitely possible.
Yeah, I think you may be right. We all of these STEM curriculum programs are pretty hard skills. As an employer, there's soft skills as well. I need somebody who is an honest broker. I need somebody who can communicate well, who can make ethical decisions, who's good at anticipating. A lot of those, people skills, if you want to call it that, and professional capabilities. There's a lot to those as well. That probably comes in time. I think it's something that can be developed. There are probably certain things that you're born with. You either have it or you don't. But I do think we can develop some of those soft skills. These hard skills certainly can be taught, but they're not for everybody.
Right. With current technology, some of the things that we've taken for granted in terms of personal interaction and face-to-face communication and written communication, some of those are culturally not as important to kids who have smartphones, who can look something up on the internet and communicate in tweets. And so we might have to focus a little bit more on not taking that for granted, that everyone knows how to, do an introduction, say hello face to face, have a customer interaction. Those are things that we might have to, sort of cast a little bit more light on as the technology. I mean, I describe it as my kids being in their phone, and we could all be sitting in the same room and no one's talking to each other.
Yeah, and that is disturbing to people of my generation, that we have gone that far where we're just kind of ignoring one another, and that's really a problem. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about some things that we may or may not agree on.
Okay.
For example,
I know what you're going to say.
the school property tax cap. This year it's starting at 1.26%. It's been below 2% almost since the beginning. And never really was 2% as it was said. And we as an organization and other advocates for education have come up with things that we would think would be good changes to the property tax cap. We know that it's popular, but it significantly lessens what we can raise locally. I understand there's an ability to pay issue here, but then it becomes more dependent upon state aid. And that's where we've had some real difficulty.
Yeah.
What's your position as an organization on the property tax cap, and how do you see it working?
Well, first I'll say we strongly advocated for the property tax cap as an organization, and we're very, very pleased to see it go into effect. Everyone who owns a property pays property taxes. Businesses pay a large percentage of those taxes, and in many instances are taxed at a disproportionately high rate. It varies from location to location. So if you're, for example, a a chain, you may be paying different rates in different communities, and it creates a lot of work for the business.
Based on assessed value modification,
Right, and all the varying local rules. So that as a backdrop, we have employers and individuals, landowners who had seen real property tax increases, nearing 8 or 9 or 10% annually. And the end result was, if you look at across the country, the highest effective property tax rate, that means compared to the value of the property, it's something like 8 out of 10 of those municipalities are in upstate New York.
Yeah.
And this makes it very, very hard for people to invest in their properties. It discourages investment. It encourages people to move out of communities that desperately need investment and residents. So it was and continues to be a problem. The cap only basically slows down the degree to which the problem compounds itself. However, recognizing that property taxes pay for schools, I think organizationally we have advocated for mandate relief across the board. We've also advocated for making it easier for school districts to combine transportation departments. We support mergers. I understand why people don't want mergers, but New York has, a lot more school districts when compared to population versus a lot of other states, and we've got almost half the kids are in one district. So there are a lot of compounding issues here that we think there are variables that you could address to fix them. I think the state aid piece of it has to be a factor, yeah. And I do think it is, and I will say this, and I'll get in trouble for saying, but I think it's terrible that you have districts that are so well-funded and wonderful and have terrific outcomes within a mile of really underfunded, underperforming school districts, and the kids don't have an option.
Well, you mentioned mergers, and that's one of those things. It's kind of like the length of the school day or length of the school year.
Right.
People have their traditions, they're emotionally invested in that school district, and you might have a situation where it makes sense for these two districts to merge and one would benefit greatly. But we've done some studies where, unfortunately, oftentimes what happens is there's one party that is attractive and the other party
Right.
is not attractive at all. And the question that this community is going to say, why would we want to merge with those guys?
Right.
And they don't.
And I think that's unfortunate because it's about the kids.
Yeah.
And if you have the misfortune of being in a district that has very bad outcomes, you can't change your odds.
Yeah.
And that to me is unfair. And it gets to a very large and sensitive political problem, and that's how we fund schools in the state overall.
Property tax cap here to stay?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, but I think that hopefully we can start having conversations about how to get rid of some of the cost drivers that don't benefit the students.
Well, we've run out of time here
Okay.
today, but we'll catch up with you at another time. And I really do appreciate you being here. I find our opportunities to talk with the business community from public education's point of view and hear from you and us go back and forth really opens up those lines of communication, which helps us both.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Heather, thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned to NYSSBA News to see positive stories occurring in school districts around New York State and for new Newsmaker segments. On behalf of my colleagues at NYSSBA, have a great day.